HOA President Karen Pierce stood smack in the middle of my front yard, yelling into a phone that had long gone dead, her voice shrill like a chicken with its throat slit, while a bunch of suit-wearing guys clutching laptops stood around her, faces blank, because not a single one of their machines could load a damn thing. Why, you ask? Because I'd ripped out the wooden fence they'd built across my property, without so much as a word to me, then mailed them a $15,000 bill with a smile via the post office. Oh, and I also reported it to Pierce County, so they'd know just how far this mess had gone. If you're wondering how it came to this, hold on, because it started off gentle, quiet, and of course, with a stack of paperwork I never got. That morning, I just wanted some peace. Me, Evan Carter, retired civil engineer, living in the first model home of Cedar Hollow, this sleepy little suburb in Washington state. I bought my house straight from the builder, before that damn homeowners association sprang up like weeds. I stepped outside, hot coffee in hand, the sun just peeking over the rooftops across the street, barefoot on grass still wet with dew. My plan was to check on the stubborn weeds I swore I'd pulled out seasons ago. I like my front yard, not big, but mine, and I'd sweated to keep it the way it was when my dad used to mow it with me. But then I saw it, right in the middle of my yard, cutting across the walkway, was a brand new wooden fence, brown painted posts, about 5 feet tall, stretching across my land for maybe 8 feet. I blinked, thinking I must be seeing things, but nope, it was still there. I set my coffee down, walked closer, and spotted little plastic flags, orange, yellow, green, staked along the fence like decorations for some utility company's birthday party. I didn't order. I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't agreed to anything. And I sure as hell hadn't invited anyone to build this thing in my yard. I stood there, hands on hips, half pissed, half amused. Who's got the time to build a fence across someone else's land without asking? But then it hit me, this is Cedar Hollow, and only the HOA, led by Karen Pierce, would have the gall to pull this off. I didn't know what I'd do yet, but one thing was for sure, they'd just picked the wrong yard to mess with. I took a last sip of coffee, stared at that damn fence, and thought to myself, all right, just you wait. Less than a few hours later, I heard the sound of engines in the distance. I stepped outside again, and sure enough, 2 pickup trucks were parked right in my driveway, not Pierce County official vehicles, no formal logos, just 2 white vans with Grayson Construction scrawled on the sides. A group of workers, maybe 5 or 6, were unloading gear, saws, hammers, and spare wooden posts that looked identical to the fence already sprouting in my yard. I frowned. They didn't just build it and bolt, they were planning to keep going. I walked over, hands in my pockets to keep it friendly, though inside I wanted to yell, "Hey guys," I called loud enough to cut through the workers' noise. "What are you doing on my property?" One guy, tall, lanky, backward cap, glanced at me, flashed an awkward smile and said, "Just following orders, buddy." He popped earbuds in, turned away like I was some rambling old man shouting at the sky. The others didn't even look up, just kept hammering posts, drilling wood like I was invisible. I stood there, blinking, unable to believe the sheer nerve. They weren't just building a fence across my yard without asking, they were ignoring me on my own land. I went back inside, pissed and confused, decided to check what this mess left behind. By afternoon, when the workers had cleared out, I went to the yard again. The fence was longer now, cutting across the walkway, encroaching another 3 feet onto my property. The soil around it was torn up, grass sloppily patched back like someone tried to cover up a clumsy crime scene, fresh wood, wet paint, but the work was sloppy as hell, posts crooked, nails sticking out in spots. I shook my head, not because the fence was ugly, but because of the blatant rudeness of it all. They'd finished before I could down my morning coffee, leaving my yard looking like a pack of wild dogs had torn through it. I turned to the front door, and that's when I saw it. A yellow sticky note slapped dead center, scribbled handwriting, HOA landscape upgrade, thanks for your understanding. No signature, no phone number, nothing, just that brazen tone, assuming I'd nod along with what they'd done. I ripped it off, crumpled it in my hand, and felt the anger start to boil. This wasn't just rude anymore, it was suspicious. Who gave them the right, and more importantly, did they think I was some fool who'd let it slide? I went inside, tossed the note on the kitchen table, grabbed my phone, and called the HOA office straight up. It rang 3 times, then voicemail. Cedar Hollow HOA office can't answer right now, please leave a message. I left one polite but firm, "Hey, this is Evan Carter at 12 Maple. Someone built a fence across my yard without asking. Call me back." I called again, then sent emails, too, just to be sure. No response, not even an auto reply like "we'll get back to you soon." I sat down, tapping the table, thinking, if they're not answering, something's fishy here. And I wasn't about to let that fence stay without an explanation. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the crumpled sticky note on the table, fingers still tapping the wood like it'd explain why that damn fence popped up in my yard. The phone stayed silent, no HOA callback, no email reply, nothing. That silence didn't just annoy me, it made me suspicious. If this was a misunderstanding, why not pick up and apologize? But no, this ignoring act smelled intentional, and I wasn't about to let them think I was some chump who'd let it go. I decided to dig deeper. First, I called Pierce County's utility office, the folks who'd know if anything legal was being built on my land. I dialed, sat through dull hold music, and finally got Jenny, a cheery-voiced clerk. "Hi, Mr. Carter," she said, "let me check your address." I heard keys clacking, then she came back. I don't see any recent permits for 12 Maple, sir." I pressed, "Nothing, no construction or landscape projects." Jenny double-checked, then confirmed, "Nope, sir, nothing in the system." I thanked her, hung up, and sat there mulling it over. If the county didn't know about this fence, it wasn't just rude, it was illegal. I needed more info, and I knew who could help. Dorothy Mills, the elderly neighbor 2 houses down, hated the HOA more than she hated the squirrels digging up her garden. I went over, knocked, and Dorothy answered with a wrinkled smile. "Evan, I'm guessing you're here about that stupid fence, right?" she said, inviting me in for hot tea. I nodded, told her about my morning, and Dorothy snorted. "That's Karen Pierce's game," she said, voice dripping with contempt. "She wants fences all over the neighborhood to uniform the landscape, boost property values. Word is she's selling her house, wants an extra few grand, or she's gunning for a Cedar Hollow City Council seat. Either way, it's all for her." I frowned. Karen Pierce, that name wasn't new. She was the HOA president, the type always in sunglasses, clutching a clipboard like a weapon, staring at you like your shrubs broke some rule you didn't know existed. Dorothy went on, "She met with the HOA board last week, rammed this project through without asking anyone. I eavesdropped from Susan on Oak. She said they hired Grayson Construction, a cheap outfit to slap it up fast." I nodded, pieces clicking. If Karen was in it for herself, this fence wasn't the community upgrade that dumb note claimed. It was a selfish move, and my yard was just a pawn she stepped on. I went home, head spinning. 6 years as a civil engineer weren't for show. I dealt with contractors skipping permits, once made a company pay for a misbuilt overpass. I knew land maps, laws, and where this fence went wrong, but before acting, I needed to be sure. I grabbed my laptop, hit Pierce County's site, pulled up Cedar Hollow's plat map. Just as I remembered, my house, 12 Maple, was the first model lot, outside HOA jurisdiction. I'd confirmed that with the county when I bought it, and it still held. Karen either didn't know, didn't care, or worse, thought I wouldn't notice. That's when I realized 2 things. 1, someone was lying, and 2, that someone might be standing somewhere in this neighborhood, ordering fences built without facing me. I smirked, not a laugh, but the kind of smirk when you know you're about to play a hand your opponent hasn't seen. Karen Pierce might be Cedar Hollow's HOA queen, but she'd picked the wrong guy to test. I shut the laptop, stood up and told myself, "All right, Karen. Let's see how good you are." I sat in the kitchen, staring at the closed laptop screen, mind still buzzing with what Dorothy said, and the plat map I'd checked. Karen Pierce was playing a big game, fences across the neighborhood for profit, my yard just a tiny square on her board. But what she didn't know was I'm not the type to sit still while someone stomps on my land. I'd confirmed with Pierce County my house wasn't HOA, and that fence had no permit. Now I needed to face the woman behind this, see how she'd explain it. Next morning, I went out early, just in time to spot Karen Pierce walking the sidewalk a few houses down. She looked the part of the HOA boss Dorothy described, bright green windbreaker, oversized sunglasses, hiding half her face, clipboard hugged like it was a crown. I walked up, hands in pockets to stay calm, though inside I wanted to ask what the hell she thought she was doing building on my yard. Karen, I called, loud enough to stop her. She turned, flashed a fake smile like we were about to share an inside joke. I didn't smile back. Karen, how do you explain the fence in my yard? I asked, blunt but not harsh. She tilted her head, slid her sunglasses down a bit, and answered in a syrupy tone that made me cringe. Oh Evan, it's just a landscape upgrade. We're sprucing up the neighborhood, raising everyone's value. I frowned, not letting her dodge that easy. Without asking me, that's my land, Karen. She smirked, the kind that makes you want to punch something. Common land, Evan, she said, patronizing like she was schooling a kid. It runs through everyone's yards. You signed the agreement, every HOA house did. I stood there, blinking, unable to believe that brazen logic, but then I remembered, this was the loophole I'd suspected. No, I said, voice hardening. My yard's not common land. My house isn't in the HOA. Karen raised an eyebrow, her smile faltering, but she kept the confidence. You signed, Evan. Everyone in this neighborhood did. I shook my head, stepped closer. No, I didn't. Mine's the first model lot, bought straight from the builder before your HOA existed. I'm not under your authority, and the county's confirmed that for years. That's when Karen's smile dropped. She stared, lips pursed, but quickly regained her cool. You're mistaken, she said, still sweet but strained. I'll double check, but this is a community project, Evan. You can't stop it. I nodded, not agreeing, but the kind of nod when you know your opponent just dug their own grave. You check, I said, then turned back home before she could spout nonsense bylaws like scripture. Back home, I pulled out all my papers again, house contract, plat map, old email from Pierce County. When the HOA tried roping me into fees, I refused. It was all clear, my place was exempt, outside their control. Karen either forgot, didn't care, or worse, hoped I didn't know, and would shut up. But I knew, and I wasn't letting it go. I sat on the couch, tapping the armrest, mind plotting. I'm not the type to blow up right away. I like handling things slow, like I made a contractor pay for a bad build back in my engineering days. But inside, I pictured Karen's face when this crashed down. She thought she could build on my land with no consequences. Fine, I'd show her consequences. Slow, sure, and stinging. I sat on the couch, fingers drumming the armrest, Karen Pierce's smug "you signed the agreement" still echoing in my head. She thought I'd buy that flimsy excuse, or worse, cower and stay quiet. Wrong, Karen. I'm not the type to lose it right away. I like taking things slow, like brewing my morning coffee, deliberate and certain. And with that damn fence, I had a plan, not just tear it down, but make the HOA pay, literally and figuratively. First I needed proof. I grabbed my phone, went to the front yard, and started snapping pictures. I got every angle, the fence slicing the walkway, crooked posts, torn up soil, with grass sloppily patched. I measured it with my dad's old tape, 8 feet of encroachment, just as I'd guessed. I jotted notes, posts sunk less than 2 feet, below safety standards. I learned as an engineer, sloppy work, clearly rushed. I smirked. If Karen thought no one noticed these details, she was dead wrong. Back inside, I pulled out my papers again. House contract, county plat map, email confirming I'm not HOA. I printed them, filed them neatly, then opened my laptop for more. No fence permits on the county site, just like Jenny said. I sent the HOA one last email, subject, demand for explanation and fence removal at 12 Maple. Short, polite, firm. The fence on my property was built without consent or county permits. Remove it immediately. I hit send, knowing they wouldn't reply, but I needed it for the record. One fake permit, or forged signature, and I'd drag this to court if I had to. I sat back, eyeing the papers on the table, plotting the next step. 6 years as a civil engineer weren't for show. I once made a contractor cough up $20,000 for a misbuilt project with the right measurements and photos. With this fence, I wouldn't stop at removal. I wanted a bill, a painful one. so Karen and her HOA would never forget not to build on my land without asking. But before grabbing the chainsaw, I had to make sure everything was airtight, no gaps for them to counter. That night, I got a package from the HOA, not an email reply, but a glossy color newsletter, probably cost a fortune to pretty up. I flipped it open, and right on page 1 was Karen Pierce's note: "Thanks to your support, our new fence project is complete. Enjoy the uniform landscape and boosted neighborhood value, all at no extra cost." I nearly laughed. Enjoy what? I got no benefit from that fence, it just sat in my yard, wrecking my walkway, no invite or permission. But that newsletter sparked an idea. They were cocky, bragging like it was a done deal. They didn't know I knew the fence was illegal, and more importantly, they didn't know I knew how to take it down. I went to the yard again under dim streetlights. The fence looked even uglier in the dark, a straight, arrogant line, like it was daring me to act, and I would. I pictured Karen getting my bill, face paling, hands shaking as she opened the envelope, but I didn't rush. I went inside, grabbed a beer from the fridge, took a sip, and started planning. I'd invite friends over a weekend barbecue, but really to dismantle that fence piece by piece. I'd record it, document everything, then send the HOA a bill, removal costs, yard repairs, even emotional distress, if I felt like it. I smirked, a real grin this time. Karen Pierce might think she's Cedar Hollow's HOA queen, but she'd picked the wrong guy to test. She didn't know I'd made a construction firm pay for a single digit off a blueprint, and with this fence, I'd make her pay, not just cash, but the look on her face when it all fell apart. I sat in the kitchen, cold beer in hand, staring at the HOA's glossy newsletter on the table. Karen Pierce's "Thanks to your support" kept looping in my head, like a quiet taunt. They thought I'd sit still, nod thanks for an illegal fence, slicing my yard. Wrong. I had proof, photos, papers, unanswered emails, and now it was time to move. Not some wild hammer-smashing spree. I like things slow, certain, like how I once made a contractor beg forgiveness back in my engineering days. With this fence, I'd take it apart, piece by piece, then build the HOA, and I'd make it fun. I planned it that night. Weekend, I'd invite friends over, a barbecue, but really to tear down that damn fence. I called Mike, college buddy turned carpenter, and Paul, lawyer, who helped me win a construction suit. "Bring beer," I said over the phone. "Chainsaw, if you've got one." Mike laughed. "You breaking something?" I smirked. "Just cleaning my yard." They didn't press, but I knew they'd love this. The day came. Perfect weather, light sun, cool breeze, ideal for an afternoon outside. I set up the grill in the backyard, blasted rock music from a Bluetooth speaker, and waited. Mike arrived first, beer crate in hand, chainsaw over his shoulder. Paul followed, laptop and papers tucked underarm. "Just in case," he said, winking. I grinned, led them to the front yard. When they saw the wooden fence cutting the walkway, Mike whistled. "What's this? HOA nonsense again?" I nodded. "Yep, and we're taking it down." We started right in. I grabbed my phone, hit record. I needed proof I wasn't randomly trashing stuff. Mike fired up the chainsaw, slicing posts with a shrill whine, while Paul and I yanked stakes, pulling panels from the dirt, fresh wood and resin mixed with grill smoke, rock music drowning the saw. I laughed loud as Mike play-acted a lumberjack, yelling timber each time a post fell. We stacked the wood neatly at my property line, careful not to cross it. I wasn't giving them ammo to sue back. The afternoon passed in laughs and cold beer. By sunset, the fence was gone from my yard, just a wood pile at the edge, and a torn-up grass strip to fix. I checked the video clear, sharp, showing we only touched my land. "Done," I said, clapping Mike's shoulder. "Now the best part." Paul smirked. "The bill, right?" I nodded, led them inside. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and drafted the invoice. I broke it down. $2,500 for removal. Friends aren't cheap. $3,500 to fix the yard, grass and soil wrecked. $9,000 for property value loss from illegal construction, based on an old case I'd read. Total $15,000, due in 30 days, or I'd sue. I printed it, stuffed it in an envelope with photos and a short letter. The fence on my property was built without consent or permits. I removed it under my rights. Please pay the attached costs. I stamped it, sent it certified mail, and sipped my beer. Step 1 done, I told Paul. He laughed. You're brutal. Hours later, after the guys left, neighbors started texting. Why's the fence gone from your yard? One asked. The neighborhood's not uniform now, another griped. I shrugged, didn't reply. They didn't know the fence was illegal, and I didn't owe them an explanation. But I knew Karen would find out soon. She couldn't miss the woodpile smack at my line. I pictured her opening the envelope, reading the bill, face going pale. She thought I'd let that fence stand without a fight. She was wrong. I went to the front yard again, stood staring at the empty strip, now fence-free. It wasn't pretty, grass torn, soil bumpy, but it was mine, and I'd taken it back. I smirked, thinking of that bill heading to Karen. She might be Cedar Hollow's HOA queen, but she'd picked the wrong guy to test. And when she realized I wasn't playing, I'd be here sipping beer, waiting to see her next move. I stood in the front yard, half-drunk, beer in hand, staring at the pile of wood from the fence, now neatly stacked at my property line. The sun had set, dim streetlights casting light on the torn-up grass strip, but I didn't care. It was mine and I'd taken it back. The $15,000 bill was on its way to Karen Pierce, and I knew she wouldn't let this slide easily. But I was ready. I went inside, smirked, thinking of her face opening that envelope, then hit the sack with a rare satisfaction. A few hours later, I jolted awake to frantic pounding on the door. I stumbled up, checked the clock, just past 7 a.m. Who's got time to bang on someone's door this early? I threw on a jacket, shuffled out, and opened it to Karen Pierce, face flushed, finger jabbing at me like she was summoning lightning. Behind her were two HOA cronies, a middle-aged guy I didn't recognize, and an old lady who looked dragged off her TV couch. Further back, two cops, one older, sipping coffee, the other younger, still sleepy-eyed. I blinked, barely processing, when Karen screamed, "What the hell did you do, Evan?" I tilted my head, playing dumb. "Sorry, what are we talking about?" Karen nearly jumped, pointing at the woodpile. "The fence, the neighborhood landscape, you destroyed it. We've got a serious violation here." Her voice screeched, drowning out the morning birds, while her backup shifted awkwardly. I glanced at the cops. The older one, probably Officer Daniels from Rumors, calmly sipped coffee. The younger scribbled in a notepad, trying to look official. I stepped into the yard, hands in pockets, voice steady. "Just cleaned my yard, Karen. You left a note about keeping the landscape nice, right?" Her face twisted like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. "Cleaned? This is vandalism. You'll pay for this, lawsuits, fines, everything." She spun to the cops, frantic. "You see this? He destroyed community property." I shrugged, went inside, grabbed the envelope I'd prepped last night, fence photos, land map, ownership papers, and my unanswered HOA emails. I handed it to Daniels, calm as can be. "Here's my proof. My house isn't HOA first model lot, bought pre-formation. This fence was on my land, no Pierce County permit. I removed it because it's illegal." Daniels flipped through, raised an eyebrow, passed it to the younger cop. Karen cut in, voice climbing. "He's lying. It's common property. We had rights." The young cop looked up, blunt. "Got a building permit, ma'am?" Karen froze, blinked, stammered. "The contractor handled that, Grayson Construction." Daniels smirked, unimpressed. "So the HOA didn't file with the county, didn't ask the homeowner before building." Karen turned to her crew, but they stared at the sidewalk, like it had just gotten fascinating. The middle-aged guy mumbled, "We thought it was part of the joint landscape." Daniels handed the papers back to Karen, deadpan. "Thinking's not a permit, ma'am? To me, you can remove what's on your land, if it's not legal. This is civil, not criminal." Karen stood there, paling, but clung on. "This is a neighborhood safety issue. He's threatening the community." Daniels shook his head. "Sue if you want, but if you built without permits, you're the one facing fines." He finished his coffee, nodded at me like a silent thumbs up, then headed to the car with the younger cop. Karen stayed, panting, glaring like she'd choke me. "You'll regret this," she hissed, then stormed off, her lackeys scrambling after. I watched them go, hands still in pockets, smirking. Karen could scream all she wanted, but she'd just lost round one without knowing it. I had papers, law, and now cops backing me. She thought I'd back down scared. She was wrong. I went inside, grabbed yesterday's beer, and told myself, bring it, Karen. Let's see who regrets it first. I stood in the kitchen, sipping morning coffee, looking out the window at the front yard now fence-free. The wood pile sat neatly at the line, a little reminder to Karen Pierce she'd lost round one. The cops had confirmed I was right, and the $15,000 bill was somewhere in her hands, awaiting a response. I figured it was over. Karen would back off, the HOA would learn its lesson, and I could mow in peace. But I forgot one thing. Karen wasn't the type to quit when she's down. A few weeks later I came back from the store, bags in hand, and saw a nauseatingly familiar sight. Two Grayson construction trucks parked in front of my house, workers unloading gear, saws, hammers, fresh posts identical to the fence I'd torn down. I stopped dead, bags nearly hitting the ground. What were they doing? I walked up, voice calm but icy. Hey, what are you doing on my property? The cap guy, probably the same jerk from before, glanced at me, shrugged. Rebuilding the fence. HOA orders. I frowned. What orders? Who approved it? He shrugged again. Not my job, just following orders. Then he turned, popped in earbuds, like I was air. I stood there, watching them sink posts, drill wood, anger boiling up. Karen wasn't just stubborn, she was brazen enough to think she could rebuild on my land after everything. I went inside, called Pierce County's office. Jenny, the chipper clerk, picked up. Hi Mr. Carter, trouble again. I briefed her, and she checked. Nope, still no permits for your address. I thanked her, hung up, then filmed the workers with my phone. If Karen wanted round two, I'd go bigger. I let them finish, not because I gave up, but to let them dig deeper. By afternoon, the new fence was up, nearly identical, cutting 8 feet across my yard. I checked, posts still shallow, substandard, grass torn up again. I smirked, recalling the last HOA newsletter. Karen probably planned to brag about Project Complete again, like I didn't exist. But this time, I had a different play. I called Henry Brooks, my city planning buddy. Henry, swing by my place. He came quick, with a tape measure and notepad. He checked the fence, shook his head. Too shallow, not up to safety code. No permit, they're toast. I showed him my video, and he noted, I'll report this to the county. It's a state violation. I nodded, thanked him, then called Paul Lawson, my lawyer pal. Paul, draft me a tough letter, I said. He laughed over the phone, fighting the HOA again. Done. That night, I sat with Paul on Zoom, crafting the letter. It demanded fence removal in 72 hours, with a new bill, $19,800, $2,500 for last removal, $3,500 for prior yard repair, $9,000, property value hit, plus $4,800 for this round's damage. It stated, this is the second unauthorized HOA encroachment on my land without permits. Remove and pay, or I'll sue civilly. Paul added a kicker, we're prepared to expand investigation into all project dealings. I smirked, nice, send it. I mailed it certified, then waited. Karen might think she's clever rebuilding, but she didn't know I'd been ready. I had video, Henry's violation report, and Paul in my corner. She wanted my yard as her chessboard. Fine, but this time, I'd topple the whole game. I sat in the living room, coffee in hand, staring out the window at the new fence. Grayson Construction had slapped back up in my yard. The removal demand and $19,800 bill were sent, certified mail confirmed, and I knew Karen Pierce wouldn't sit quiet. But this time, I wasn't just waiting, I was ready to take it to court if needed. Henry Brooks had reported the HOA's violation to Pierce County, and Paul Lawson was primed to throw a legal punch. Karen wanted to keep playing, all right, but she was about to lose everything. A few days later, I got a letter from a law office in downtown Cedar Hollow, not fancy, just some cheap firm Karen likely scrambled to hire. It demanded I cease damaging HOA property, and threatened to sue if I didn't pay to fix the fence. I laughed out loud, showed it to Paul on Zoom. He read it, snorted, this is garbage. They don't even know what trespasses means. We fired back a reply, short sharp with all evidence, photos, video, ownership docs, county confirmation, Henry's report. Paul ended it, If the HOA persists, we'll countersue and demand a full project audit. I sent it off, then waited for Karen's move. I didn't wait long. A week later, an HOA emergency meeting notice slipped under every door, landscape and board transparency issues. I knew this was Karen's SOS, so I went to watch her squirm. The community room was packed. Cedar Hollow folks usually skip meetings, but this time, they showed up like it was free movie night. Karen stood at the mic, glaring green windbreaker, trying to look confident, but her eyes darted. A guy stood, "Why'd the fence at Evan Carter's get torn down then rebuilt? Who's paying?" A woman cut in, "Who approved this?" I never agreed. Karen stammered, voice shaky. We're enhancing the landscape, just a hiccup." Hiccup. I sat in the back, arms crossed, smirking. Another guy stood. "I checked my deed. I'm not HOA either. How long you been scamming us?" The room erupted, yelling, questions flying, Karen sweating, speechless. I didn't need to say a word. They tore her empire down without me lifting a finger. 2 days later, Henry called. Pierce County fined the HOA for unpermitted construction, ordered the fence down in a week. Karen had no outs. I called Paul, and we went all in. Filed a civil suit in county court for $19,800 plus legal fees. The trial was quick. I represented myself, brought everything: photos, video, ownership papers, Henry's report, even testimony, from a Grayson construction guy, Tim, the boss, who said Karen pushed them to build without permits. "She said do it, no one'll sue," he mumbled, head down. Karen sat across, pale, her lawyer fumbling. The judge flipped through my stuff, looked at me. "Mr. Carter, you can remove what's illegal on your land. The HOA had no permit, no right to build." To Karen, "Miss Pierce, your group owes Carter $19,800 plus $2,000 court costs. Remove the fence now, or face more fines." Karen gaped, silent. I smirked, thanked the judge, and left court feeling light. Next day, the Cedar Hollow Times ran it: "Man defeats tyrannical HOA, illegal fence removed." Karen quit right after. Official reason, personal, but everyone knew resident pressure and fines forced her out. The HOA met again, sans Karen, and agreed to ditch the fence from my yard. I stood outside, watching Grayson's crew pull posts, feeling like I'd won a bloodless war. The wood vanished, my yard empty again, grass still a mess, but I'd fix it later. Karen might have thought she ruled Cedar Hollow, but she picked the wrong guy to test. I didn't just remove the fence, I cost her her seat, her face, and a pile of cash. When it settled, I sat on the couch, sipped beer, and thought, well played, Karen. Now sit this one out. I stood in the front yard, small shovel in hand, staring at the empty strip now fully fence-free. Grayson Construction had hauled off the last wood pile, leaving a messy grass patch I'd fix when I got time. Karen Pierce was gone, the HOA fined, and the $19,800 plus court fees hit my account, a sweet victory. I didn't expect to be so complete. But the story wasn't quite over, because even with Karen beaten, I could still feel this fight's echo in every Cedar Hollow corner. A few days post-trial, I was mowing when Laura Hayes, the new HOA president, showed up. She wasn't Karen, no flashy windbreaker, no smug shades, just a plain middle-aged woman with an awkward smile. "Mr. Carter," she said, voice shaky, "I'm here to apologize for what happened. Under me we won't let it repeat." I nodded, said nothing, handed her a letter I'd prepped, typed, notarized, stating, "Any future encroachment on my land without written consent will lead to immediate litigation. I reject HOA authority now or ever." Laura took it, nodded fast, "I get it. Thank you." She left, and I smirked. At least she's smarter than Karen. My yard was peaceful again, but the Karen battle left its mark on the neighborhood. Neighbors stopped by, not griping about unmatched landscapes anymore, but asking how I beat the HOA. Dorothy Mills, the old lady who hated Karen from day one, brought homemade cookies, laughing, "You're my hero, Evan." She had it coming. An old guy down Maple invited me for coffee, wanting details on how I used papers and law to crush Karen. I told them, not to brag, but to show it wasn't guts or stubbornness, it was principle. That night on the couch, cold beer in hand, I replayed it all, my dad taught me to guard what's mine, not with fists, but brains. That front yard wasn't just land, it was memories, sweat I poured to keep it like when Dad was alive. Karen thought she could fence it off without asking, then guilt me into thanking her. She was wrong. I didn't just remove the fence, I made her pay for the shovel I used, literally and figuratively. But what satisfied me most wasn't the money or Karen quitting. It was standing in the yard, seeing that empty space fully mine again. I planted a row of small trees along the line, not tall, not arrogant, like Karen's fence, but a natural barrier, just enough to say, "This is mine, don't even think about touching it." Every glance at it brought a little joy, not from winning, but from knowing when someone tries building their power on your land, you don't just tear it down, you make them pay. This story could have ended here, with Karen slinking out of Cedar Hollow and me back to quiet life. But it's bigger than that. It's about standing up when someone thinks they can bully you, using brains over fists, and not letting anyone trample what you value. I'm no hero, just a guy who overreads contracts, and once threatened to sue an airline over luggage size. But when Karen picked my yard as her chessboard, she didn't expect me to flip the table. I sipped the last of my beer, looked out at the yard through the window. Maybe I went overboard, maybe I could have let that fence stand. But each time I see those little trees, I know I did right. Because when someone builds a fence on your land without asking, you don't just remove it, you make them pay for the shovel, and you make them remember. "Try it again, Karen," I muttered, then laughed alone in my quiet house. The tale of Evan Carter's war with Karen Pierce and the Cedar Hollow HOA mirrors a common reality in the U.S. today: the tension between individual rights and collective power in suburban neighborhoods. In America, homeowners associations (OAs) are everywhere, managing about 30% of homes to maintain aesthetics and property values. Yet, as with Karen's unpermitted fence on Evan's land, many overstep, imposing rules without respecting private ownership, a core American value. Evan, with his engineering know-how and patience, used legal docs, video proof and friends like Paul and Henry to turn the tables, costing Karen her post and the HOA $19,800. It reflects the U.S. litigation culture when rights get trampled, and the weight of knowing the law in a rule-driven society. The takeaway isn't just don't let anyone bully you, it's a practical guide for life in America now. Facing overreach like Karen's rogue fence, don't react on impulse. Do like Evan, gather evidence, photos, videos, deeds, know the law. Evan checked with Pierce County, and tap your network. Paul drafted legal letters. Living in the U.S. with its complex legal system and emphasis on individual rights means you've got to proactively defend yourself. Don't shy from court if needed, like Evan did. It's a solid way to hold folks accountable, not just reclaiming your yard, but making them pay for the shovel, true to America's spirit of freedom and fairness. If you enjoyed how Evan Carter made Karen and the HOA pay for that illegal fence, subscribe to the channel to catch more gripping tales of rights and justice. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video, where we'll dive into more unforgettable backyard battles.